a 12-year-old choir girl from Connecticut, vanished in 1975 during a spring concert reception. For 15 years, her parents searched for answers until her father breaks open her old practice cello gathering dust in the attic. What he discovers hidden inside reveals a shocking secret that becomes the key to uncovering what happened to their daughter, and the morning light filtered weakly through the dusty windows of the Bennett household. In Ridgefield, Connecticut, Julia Bennett, 60 years old, led the way up the narrow staircase to the attic, her footsteps creaking on the worn wooden boards behind her. Richard Bennett followed, pressing his phone to his ear. "Yes, that's correct," Richard said into the receiver. "Tomorrow morning, 8:00 sharp. The moving company should arrive then." He paused, listening. "No, we'll have everything packed and ready, thank you." Julia reached the attic door and pushed it open, releasing a cloud of dust that made her cough. And the space hadn't been properly cleaned in years. Boxes were stacked haphazardly against the walls, old furniture covered in sheets like ghosts from their past 15 years. Julia murmured more to herself than to Richard. 15 years since Sophia vanished. Richard ended his call and pocketed the phone. He placed a gentle hand on his wife's shoulder. "I know, Julia, that's why we're doing this. A fresh start across the country, away from all these memories." Julia nodded. Though her heart felt heavy, they had planned this move for a month now, researching neighborhoods in Oregon, finding new jobs tomorrow. The moving truck would come, and they would leave Ridgefield forever. She grabbed an empty cardboard box and began filling it with old photo albums. Richard worked on the other side of the attic, sorting through Christmas decorations they hadn't used since Sophia's disappearance. Their daughter had been 12 years old when she vanished at a concert she had been performing with a small youth choir ensemble at a seasonal regional concert. After the show, during the reception, she had simply disappeared. "Richard," Julia called suddenly, "look at this." In the far corner of the attic, covered in spiderella webs and dust, sat an old cello. Julia approached it slowly, as if it might vanish like Sophia had. "It's her first cello," Julia whispered. "Not the professional one she used at events and competitions. This was the very first one we bought her when she started practicing at 7 years old." Richard joined her memories, flooding back. "I remember buying this. We didn't know if she'd stick with it, so we bought this cheaper model just to see if she'd really love it. And she did." Julia added, tears forming in her eyes. "By the time she was 9, we bought her that beautiful professional cello, the one that disappeared with her that day. The police never found it." Richard bent down to pick up the old cello. He noticed its case was on the other side of the attic as he lifted the instrument, intending to place it in the case. He heard something unusual. A rattling sound came from inside the cello. "That's odd," he muttered. Shaking the cello gently, the sound persisted. "There's something inside." He tried to peer through the F-holes, the decorative openings in the cello's body. Even after switching on the attic's overhead light, he couldn't make out what was inside. Julia noticed his strange behavior. "What are you doing?" "There's something in here," Richard said. "I want to break it open and break it." Julia was shocked. "Richard, no, it's a memory of Sophia, her first cello. We should keep it intact." But Richard was already searching the attic for tools. He found an old toolbox and pulled out a thin pry bar and a small hammer. "I need to know what's inside, Julia. What if it's important?" He worked carefully, using the pry bar to gently separate the top plate of the cello from the sides. The old glue had weakened over the years, making his task easier with patience and precision. He managed to open it without completely destroying the instrument. "There," he said, reaching into the cello. His fingers found paper. He pulled out 3 envelopes, each with Sophia's name written on the front. Julia gasped. "What are those?" With trembling hands, they opened the first envelope. It wasn't sealed, and inside was a collection of letters, pages and pages of them. Richard unfolded one and began reading aloud. "Dearest Sophia, when you play your cello, the world stops spinning. Your music fills my heart with joy. I've never known before." They read through letter after letter. All were love letters, beautifully written, poetic and passionate. Each one ended the same way, with the word love, and a hand-drawn sketch of a heart intertwined with a rose. But there was no name, no signature to identify the sender. She had a boyfriend. Julia breathed. Our 12-year-old daughter had a boyfriend. And we never knew. Richard looked troubled. This doesn't make sense back in 1975. This would have been completely unacceptable and, I told Sophia. I wouldn't mind if she wanted to have friends who were boys. Why would she hide this from me? Julia's expression hardened because I told her explicitly no boyfriends before college. I wanted her to focus on her studies and her music. She never questioned my rules. Her voice cracked. She must have hidden these letters in her old cello because she knew I'd disapprove. A terrible thought crossed Julia's mind. Richard, what if this boy had something to do with her disappearance? Julia, don't jump to conclusions. Richard warned, we don't know anything yet. But Julia was already heading for the attic stairs. I'm calling Detective Carl Darnell. He needs to know about this. She hurried down to the kitchen, her hands shaking as she dialed the detective's number. After 3 rings, a familiar gruff voice answered Detective Darnell. Detective, it's Julia Bennett, Sophia's mother. There was a pause. Mrs. Bennett, how can I help you? We found something. Julia said quickly. Love letters hidden in Sophia's old cello. She had a boyfriend we never knew about. Love letters. The detective's voice was neutral. Have you read them? Any threatening messages? Anything inappropriate? No. Julia admitted they're mostly poetic, beautiful, even. But, Detective, don't you think this could be significant, Detective? Darnell sighed, audibly. Mrs. Bennett. Then teenagers hide love letters from their parents all the time. Unless there's something threatening or concerning in those letters, I don't see how this changes anything. You're welcome to bring them by the station. But I wouldn't get your hopes up. Julia felt deflated. I see. Thank you, Detective. She hung up and returned to the attic where Richard was still examining the letters. What did he say? Richard asked. He wasn't interested. Julia said bitterly. Said teenagers hide love letters all the time. I can bring them to the station, but he doesn't think they're significant. I told you so, Richard said gently. Julia picked up the envelopes. I'm still going to take them. I'll drive to the station myself and make them listen. Richard looked at his watch. Okay. But don't be too long. I still need your help with the packing and Julia. He gestured at her faded floral dress. Maybe change first, that dress has seen better days. Julia looked down at her dress, running her hands over the worn fabric. I love this dress, Sophia always said. It made me look like a garden fairy. It reminds me of her. She collected the envelopes and started down the stairs. I won't be long, Richard. I promise I'm taking the car, and if you need your glucose tablet, you remember where it is, right? Richard nodded and then watched her go. Worry etched on his face. He knew his wife well enough to recognize the determined set of her jaw. She wouldn't give up easily. Julia grabbed her purse from the hall table and tucked the envelopes inside. She headed out the front door. Julia gripped the steering wheel as she navigated through the familiar streets of Ridgefield at a red traffic light at Maple Street intersection. She reached into her purse and pulled out one of the letters. Her eyes scanned the elegant handwriting again. My beloved Sophia, yesterday, when you played Elgar's Concerto, I felt my soul leave my body and dance with yours. Julia's hands trembled. If Sophia had a boyfriend, why hadn't he come forward when she disappeared? Why stay silent for 15 years? And these letters, they were too flattering. The light turned green, and Julia carefully placed the letter back in her purse. Sophia had attended St. Catherine's Girls' Middle School. No boys there, and the only place she regularly interacted with boys was at her music academy, where she practiced cello in mixed groups of 3 students. Julia realized the Ridgefield Music Academy was on the same route to the police station. She would pass it in just a few minutes, perhaps. Sophia's old teacher might remember something. Gregory Hale, yes, that was his name. He'd taught Sophia for 5 years before she disappeared. She turned into the academy's parking lot, and the building had been renovated since Sophia's time. Gleaming glass doors replaced the old wooden ones, and a modern addition extended from the east side. Julia entered through the main entrance. The receptionist, a young woman with auburn hair, looked up with a professional smile. Good morning. How can I help you? I'd like to see Gregory Hale, please. Julia said he was my daughter's cello teacher. Mr. Hale is currently in session. The receptionist replied, checking her computer. But his class will end in about 10 minutes. I can take you to wait outside his classroom. Julia followed the receptionist down a long hallway, lined with practice rooms. The faint sounds of various instruments, piano, violin, flute, filtered through the doors. They stopped outside room 12. You can wait here, the receptionist said, gesturing to a row of chairs against the wall. He should be finished soon. Julia sat down, but restlessness overtook her almost immediately. The letters in her bag seemed to burn through the leather. She stood and began pacing the narrow hallway, and able to resist, she peered through the small window in the classroom door. Inside, Gregory Hale looked much as she remembered, tall, thin, with graying hair, now completely silver. He was speaking to a teenage girl who was carefully placing her cello in its case. Julia watched as Gregory reached into his briefcase and pulled out an envelope and a pen. He placed both items in the girl's bag. "I've put your report card in your bag," she heard him say through the door. Julia noted the envelope looked completely different from the aged ones she'd found, crisp white with the Academy's logo visible. Even from her distance, and the door opened suddenly, and the girl, perhaps 16 or 17, emerged carrying her cello case. She had long dark hair and a somber expression. Gregory followed her out. His hand resting on her shoulder, read the card. "Only when you get home," Gregory said to the girl. "Consider what I've written." Julia felt a flicker of discomfort at the scene. Something about the teacher's hand on the girl's shoulder, the specific instruction to read the card only at home. But she pushed the feeling aside. Her mind was too focused on Sophia's letters to dwell on anything else. Gregory noticed Julia then, and quickly removed his hand from the girl's shoulder. Recognition dawned on his face. "Mrs. Sophia's mother," he said, clearly not remembering her name. "Julia Bennett," she supplied. "Of course, Mrs. Bennett. What brings you here after all this time?" His expression grew sympathetic. "We is Sophia's case. Still cold," Julia replied, her voice heavy. "No new leads. The police have essentially given up. Richard and I are moving across the country tomorrow." "I'm so sorry to hear that," Gregory said. "Though perhaps a fresh start might be good for you both. Sometimes staying in one place keeps the wounds fresh from down the hallway." Julia heard the receptionist's voice. "Grace, your father hasn't arrived yet. You can wait in the lobby." Julia turned back to Gregory. "Actually, the reason I'm here, we found something this morning while packing." She reached into her bag and pulled out the envelopes, love letters hidden in Sophia's old cello. "I was hoping you might remember if she was close to any particular boy in her classes." Gregory's eyebrows rose. "Love letters, may I see?" Julia handed him one of the opened letters she watched, as his eyes scanned the flowing script. After a long moment, he carefully refolded the letter and returned it to her. "I'm afraid I can't help," he said slowly. "It was so long ago. I don't recall Sophia being particularly close to any boys. Most of her friends were girls. Have you tried her school? St. Catherine's was girls." Only Julia reminded him. Yes, of course." Gregory paused, though, Students from the girls' and boys' schools often met after classes. The buildings were separate, but adjacent parents often mentioned their children socializing across school lines. Julia considered this. It was possible she'd been about to ask another question when Gregory glanced at his watch. "I'm terribly sorry, but I need to go," he said quickly. "I'm catching a flight to Vermont in a few hours. I have a performance tomorrow." "Oh, how wonderful," Julia said. "What kind of event?" Gregory hesitated, then laughed awkwardly. "It's nothing grand, really. Just a small solo cello performance at a luxury wedding. Pays well, though." He excused himself again and retreated back into the classroom. Julia returned to the reception area. The same receptionist smiled at her approach. "Did you find Mr. Hale?" "Yes, thank you." Julia said, "Actually, I wonder if you could help me with something else. Could you check your database for which students shared classes with my daughter, Sophia Bennett, in 1975? The receptionist's expression softened. "I know about your daughter's case, Mrs. Bennett. Of course I'll help." She typed rapidly on her computer while waiting. Julia noticed the girl from Gregory's class, Grace, apparently sitting in the lobby she was reading. What appeared to be a card, the envelope resting on her leg. Julia remembered Gregory's instruction to read it at home. Why that specific directive? It seemed odd. She considered approaching the girl but decided against it. Grace looked unhappy, almost gloomy, and Julia didn't want to frighten her with questions. Here we are. The receptionist said Sophia Bennett's classmates in 1975 were Francesca Chan and Timothy Picoult. Julia recognized Timothy's name. The police had interviewed him and his parents extensively. He'd been cleared of any involvement. "Thank you so much. Julia said you've always been so helpful. I wanted to let you know that my husband and I—" The front door suddenly burst open. A man in an expensive suit stood in the doorway, clearly agitated. "Grace." "Let's go," he barked. "What's that you're reading?" The girl quickly slipped the card back into its envelope and stood following her father toward the door. Her expression remained downcast before the door closed completely. Julia glimpsed the man, snatching the envelope from his daughter, pulling out the card to read it himself. "Don't worry about them," the receptionist said quietly. "That's her father. He's always running late." "She looks so sad," Julia observed. "That's Grace for you. I rarely see her smile. Poor girl, always under so much pressure." Julia nodded sympathetically, then excused herself as she stepped outside. She was shocked to see Grace's father, roughly pulling his daughter toward a black Mercedes. His face was red with anger before shoving Grace into the car. He crumpled the card and envelope and threw them into a nearby waste bin. Julia stood frozen, watching the Mercedes speed away. Whatever was on that card had clearly upset Grace's father tremendously. Julia stood alone in the parking lot, watching the black Mercedes disappear around the corner. The waste bin seemed to call to her what could have been on that card to make Grace's father so furious, and why had Gregory specifically told the girl to read it at home? She glanced around the parking lot. A few people walked to their cars, but no one was paying attention to her feeling slightly ridiculous. Julia approached the bin. She lifted the lid and peered. Inside, the crumpled white envelope lay on top of some coffee cups and food wrappers. Julia reached in quickly and grabbed both the card and envelope. As soon as her fingers touched the paper, she noticed something unusual. The texture wasn't like regular printer paper or even quality cardstock. It felt almost waxy with a strange coating, and the envelope bore the girl's name in typed letters. Grace W. Hart. Julia unfolded the card at first glance. It appeared to be a standard progress report from the Ridgefield Music Academy. The Academy's logo was printed at the top, followed by a detailed evaluation: student, Grace W. Hart. Date, current instructor, Gregory Hale. Performance review. Grace's technique remains inconsistent. Her bow control showed weakness during today's session, particularly in the allegro passages. Intonation problems persist in the upper positions. She is not yet ready to advance to level 7. Recommendation: continue at current level for another month. Julia's heart went out to the poor girl. No wonder Grace had looked so dejected. And no wonder her father had been so angry. The pressure to excel must be enormous. She was about to fold the card when something in the bottom right corner caught her eye. A small stamp about the size of a quarter. Julia's breath caught in her throat, and the stamp showed a heart intertwined with a rose. Her hands shaking, Julia hurried to her car. She fumbled with her keys, finally managing to unlock the door and slide into the driver's seat. She pulled Sophia's letters from her purse and laid them on the dashboard next to Grace's report card, and the comparison made her heart race. The symbols were remarkably similar, a heart with a rose growing through it. But there were differences too. Sophia's letters featured hand-drawn sketches, each one slightly unique, clearly made with pen and ink. Grace's card bore a crisp, uniform stamp, probably made with a rubber stamp and ink pad. Still, the basic design was undeniably similar. The way the rose stem curved through the heart, the number of leaves on the stem, even the small thorns, all eerily alike. Julia needed to ask Gregory about this stamp. She left her car and walked quickly back toward the academy building. But as she approached, she saw Gregory emerging from the side entrance, laden with his cello case and a leather briefcase. He moved with urgency, a mobile phone pressed between his ear and shoulder as he loaded his belongings into a silver BMW. Julia slowed her pace. Watching mobile phones were still rare and expensive. Gregory must do very well for himself, but then he was a respected performer and teacher. Such success wasn't surprising. As she drew closer, she caught fragments of his conversation through his open car window. "Yes, I'm coming there now. Prepare her." Gregory slammed his trunk shut and hurried to the driver's side. Within seconds, he was pulling out of the parking lot, tires squealing slightly in his haste. Julia stood there, Grace's card still clutched in her hand. The moment had passed. She couldn't chase him. Down the street, walking slowly back to her car, Julia tried to organize her thoughts. She looked again at the stamp on Grace's card, then at Sophia's letters. "You're being ridiculous," she told herself firmly. Gregory Hale is a respected teacher. He wouldn't write love letters to a 12-year-old girl. The stamps are similar. Yes, but a heart and rose is a common romantic symbol. Thousands of people probably use similar designs. Still, doubt gnawed at her. The similarity was striking. And Gregory's behavior with Grace, the hand on her shoulder, the instruction to read the card at home, something felt off. Julia made a decision. She would continue to the police station, as originally planned. Maybe Detective Darnell would see something she'd missed. Maybe the police could check Sophia's school talk to more of her classmates. As she started her car, Richard's words from that morning echoed in her mind. "Don't get your hopes up." But hope was all she had left. Hope that somewhere in these letters, in this strange stamp, lay the key to finding out what happened to Sophia. 5 years ago. She tucked Grace's card into her purse with Sophia's letters and pulled out of the academy parking lot, heading toward the police station. Julia drove slowly through the residential streets, her mind still wrestling with the strange stamp on Grace's card. She was approaching Millwood Park, a neighborhood green space with its old oak trees and well-worn playground equipment. A familiar figure caught her eye. There on one of the swings sat Grace Hart, and the girl had taken her cello out of its case and was playing from memory, the melancholy notes of Bach's Suite No. 1-2. Drifting across the empty park, her father's black Mercedes was nowhere to be seen. Julia pulled over and parked. Something wasn't right. Why would a teenage girl be alone in a park with her expensive cello? She got out of her car and walked across the grass toward the swings. Grace noticed her approach and abruptly stopped playing. "Just leave me alone," Grace said flatly, not even looking up. Julia continued walking. "I saw you at the music school earlier." Grace finally looked at her eyes narrowed. "So what? I saw you leave with a man, your father. I assume, why are you here alone?" Grace turned away, her fingers tightening on her cello's neck. "It's not your problem." Julia sat down on the swing next to her, moving slowly and carefully. "My daughter used to play cello, too. She loved that same Bach suite you were just playing. Said it made her feel like she was talking to God." Grace's expression softened slightly. After a long pause, she spoke. "My father dropped me off here. We had a fight in the car. I didn't want to go home with him." "What was the fight about?" Julia asked gently, though she already suspected. Grace's voice turned bitter. "What do you think? My performance, my failure. I've been stuck at level 6 for 6 months. 6 months? Every other student has moved up, except me. Dad says I'm wasting his money. Wasting my talent, that must be very hard," Julia said. Grace laughed humorously. He said, "Maybe I should consider what, taking the extra private sessions with Sir Gregory so I can get into the Starlight Daughter Club." Julia frowned. The name itself sounded odd to her. "I've never heard of that. Is it part of the academy?" Grace hesitated, then shook her head. "Not exactly. It's an extra session at Gregory's private studio. He handpicks certain students. The girls who take those sessions always seem to advance faster. They get the solos, the scholarships, everything. Why haven't you taken these sessions before?" Grace's jaw tightened. "Because it felt unnecessary. Those girls who do it, They're not that much better than me. I wanted to prove I could succeed without whatever special treatment he gives them. Prove it to them, to my father, to myself. Julia reached into her purse. Grace, I have something that belongs to you. She pulled out the crumpled report card. I'm sorry I took this from the bin after your father threw it away. Grace's eyes widened. You took this from the bin. What the hell? That's creepy. Why would you do that? I was curious, Julia admitted. I saw Gregory give you the envelope, and I heard him tell you to read it only at home. Why would he say that about a simple report card? Grace stood up abruptly defensive. You're stalking me. What kind of creepy woman are you? Calm down, I'm not stalking you, Julia said quickly. I was looking for information about my daughter. She went missing 15 years ago. She was Gregory's student too. When I saw your card, I noticed the stamp. It's similar to something in my daughter's letters, Grace. Shook her head. Backing away. I'm sorry about your daughter, but I can't deal with this right now. I have my own problems. She paused and then added, but thank you for the encouragement. You're right, I should take those extra sessions. I'll go to Gregory's studio now. She began packing her cello into its case with practice efficiency. Julia watched her hurried movements wait. Julia called, let me give you a ride. Grace turned, irritated. Stop stalking me. I'm not stalking you. Julia insisted. I'm offering to drive you. Look around. Do you see any taxis? Let me take you home or to Gregory's studio, wherever you need to go. At least then I'll know you got there safely. Grace looked around the empty park and quiet street. No yellow cabs in sight. This wasn't exactly a busy area. Fine, Grace said reluctantly. I want to go to Gregory's studio to discuss the extra sessions. Julia suddenly remembered. But Gregory told me he was catching a flight. Grace frowned. That's not right. When he gave me the card, he specifically said I could come to his studio this afternoon if I changed my mind about the sessions. That's when he told me to read the card at home, but I was too curious and read it in the lobby. She shrugged. It was just a report card anyway. A chill ran down Julia's spine. Why would he lie to me about leaving? Maybe he's not lying. Like Grace suggested, maybe his flight is later. You should go home. Julia said firmly, talk to your father first about these sessions. Grace's face hardened. No way, he'll just blame me again for not taking them sooner. I've made up my mind, Julia sighed. If you're determined to go, then I'll drive you there, but I'm staying with you and I'll drive you home afterward. We should call your father first, let him know where you are. He won't care, Grace said bitterly. He's probably in some important meeting by now. Making money is more important than his failure of a daughter. At least, I need to call my husband, Julia. Said, let him know. I'll be home later than expected. They walked across the park together. Grace carrying her cello case, Julia found a payphone on the corner and dialed. Home! Richard answered on the second ring. Julia, what's going on? We have so much packing to do. I know I'm sorry, this might be important. I'll be home as soon as I can. She hung up before he could protest. Further, Grace was already standing by Julia's car, waiting. Thank you, Grace said quietly, as Julia unlocked the doors for the ride, and for not just leaving me in the park. Julia started the engine. No child should be left alone when they're hurting now. Where exactly is Gregory's studio? Grace gave her the address. 47 Woodland Drive. About 15 minutes away. She glanced at Grace, who sat staring out the window, her cello case propped between her knees. As they pulled away from the park, Julia couldn't shake the feeling that she was driving towards something significant. Julia followed Grace's directions through the winding streets of Ridgefield's outskirts. The houses grew larger and more spread apart. As they left the town center behind, turn left here, Grace said, pointing to a tree-lined private road. Mr. Gregory told me about his studio several times. He said it's where real artists are made. Julia turned onto Woodland Drive. After another minute, Grace pointed ahead, their number 47. The address led to an impressive villa set back from the road, surrounded by mature oaks and a manicured lawn. This wasn't a commercial studio at all. It was clearly a private residence. Looks like he hasn't left for the airport. Julia observed Gregory's silver BMW sat in the driveway, next to a white van they parked, and stepped out immediately. The sound of music drifted from the house, a cello accompanied by piano. Julia's heart skipped. She knew this piece intimately. It was Sophia's favorite for Alleghi, but played with improvisational flourishes she'd never heard before. Grace walked up to the heavy wooden door and knocked. After a moment, it opened to reveal a middle-aged woman with Hispanic features wearing a housekeeper's uniform. "We're not expecting anyone," the woman said with a slight accent. And the music from inside abruptly stopped. Footsteps approached, and Gregory appeared behind the housekeeper. His face registered genuine shock at seeing Julia and Grace together. "Mrs. Bennet, Grace." He looked between them. "Do you two know each other?" "It's a long story," Julia said carefully. "I thought you were leaving for the airport." Gregory blinked rapidly. "Yes, but not now. My flight is later this evening." He glanced back into the house. "I still have a student inside. I apologize, but could you wait for a few minutes?" He gestured for them to enter. The housekeeper stepped aside, and Gregory led them down a hallway, lined with framed photographs of performers and concert programs. He opened a door to what had clearly once been a bedroom, but was now furnished as a waiting room with several chairs and a small sofa. "Please, make yourselves comfortable." Gregory said, "I'll be with you shortly." He closed the door, leaving them alone. Julia and Grace sat on the sofa, and the walls were covered with more photographs. Gregory with various young female students, all holding cellos or violins. Grace opened her bag to check the report card again. She pulled out something else instead. "What's this?" She held up what looked like an expensive pen. "This isn't mine." Julia leaned closer. "I saw Gregory put that in your bag, along with the envelope at the academy." Grace looked at her suspiciously. "You really were watching me." "Not you," specifically Julia clarified. "I was watching the teacher." Grace examined the pen, turning it over in her hands. When she twisted the top, a purple light emanated from one end. "It's an invisible ink pen, I think." Julia realized. "Wait, give me your report card." Grace handed it over. Julia shone the ultraviolet light on the front of the card. Nothing appeared. She flipped it over and tried the back. Faint markings began to glow under the light. Both women leaned in, trying to make out the words. "They see a student, and I see my star, my daughter of sound, come and will shine together." My love below the text, revealed in glowing ink, was the hand-drawn symbol of a heart intertwined with a rose. Grace jerked back. "Oh my God." Julia's hands trembled. The symbol was identical to the ones in Sophia's letters, not similar, identical, the same artist's hand had drawn. Both she quickly shoved the black light pen deep into the creases of the sofa cushions. "Put the card back in your bag," she whispered urgently. Grace complied, her face pale. "I'm so sorry, that's just if he really wrote that. It's beyond creepy." Julia held her finger to her lips in a hushed voice. She said, "That's the same symbol from my daughter's letters, the ones I tried to tell you about. This man is dangerous. We need to leave now." "What do we do?" Grace whispered back. "We'll tell Gregory you've changed your mind about the session. Say you'll come back another time once we're out." We called the police. Before Grace could respond, the door opened. Gregory stood in the doorway, smiling apologetically. "Sorry for the delay. Now what brings you both here?" Grace opened her mouth, closed it, then tried again. I'm sorry. I thought I was ready to discuss the extra sessions, but I'm not. I should come back when I'm better prepared." "Yes," Julia added quickly. "We should go." "Grace needs time to think." Gregory studied them for a long moment. "That's fine if you're not ready for the full session. But Grace, we should at least discuss your stagnant performance. Your father called me earlier. He's concerned about your lack of progress. He asked me to push you harder, and since you're here now, I think we should talk about it." He turned to Julia. "Would you excuse us for a few minutes? I need to speak with Grace privately. about her development. Julia's heart raced. She couldn't leave Grace alone with him. But refusing might make him suspicious. Actually, Julia said, "I'll wait outside. I need some fresh air. Please wait here." Gregory insisted. "It's more comfortable." "No, really. I'll be right outside." Julia stood and headed for the door. Before he could protest further, she walked quickly down the hallway and out the front door. Once outside, guilt washed over her for leaving Grace. But she needed to find help immediately. Julia hurried toward her car as she passed the garage. She noticed the door was open. The housekeeper was inside, loading boxes into the white van, apparently preparing for Gregory's departure. The van's back window was covered with a large promotional poster. Julia stopped short. The poster showed Gregory, in formal concert attire, standing beside a young woman, holding a cello. The text read, "Gregory Hale and Amelia Dawson, Masters of Classical Harmony." There was something familiar about the young woman, her face, the way she cradled the cello. Julia was sure she'd seen her before, maybe on television or in a newspaper article. She glanced into the garage and froze. Propped against the far wall was a cello. Not just any cello. Julia recognized the size, instantly a 3/4 instrument, with a distinctive wood grain pattern. She knew by heart. She stepped closer, narrowing her eyes, and there it was, the small scratch Sophia had made when she'd accidentally banged it against a music stand during rehearsal. This was the cello they had given Sophia when she was 9, the professional instrument that had disappeared the day she did. But there was no time to dwell on it. She needed to find a payphone immediately. Every second Grace remained in that house. With Gregory was a second too long. Julia reached her car and backed out of the driveway. She pressed harder on the accelerator, praying she could find a phone and get help back to Grace before Gregory did. Something terrible. Julia drove frantically through the streets, searching for a payphone. After several agonizing minutes, she spotted one outside a local convenience store. She parked haphazardly and ran to the phone, fumbling with coins. "Police emergency." The dispatcher answered. "This is Julia Bennett," she said breathlessly. "I need officers at 47 Woodland Drive. Immediately. I believe Gregory Hale has been grooming young girls. We found a hidden message on a student's report card with the same heart and rose symbol that was in my missing daughter's letters. I think he kidnapped my daughter Sophia. 15 years ago, officers will respond," the dispatcher said. "Are you safe?" "Yes, but there's a girl still at the house. Grace Hart, she's in danger. Please hurry and contact my husband, Richard Bennett." She gave their home number and address quickly. Julia raced back to her car. The drive back to Gregory's house felt endless. When she finally turned onto Woodland Drive, she saw Gregory emerging from the house with a young woman. They were descending the porch stairs, Gregory's hand firmly on the woman's elbow, clearly rushing her. The woman stumbled on the last step and collapsed onto the driveway. She looked terribly weak and disoriented. Julia jumped from her car and ran to them. "What's wrong with her?" Gregory looked up, startled by her return. "She's fine, just overtired from practicing. I'll carry her to the van. And she'll sleep on the way and be better by the time we reach the airport. You can't take her like this." Julia protested. "She needs medical help." "She practiced too hard," Gregory insisted, trying to lift the woman. "She's just exhausted." The housekeeper appeared in the doorway. "But Mr. Gregory, Amelia needs her sugar." "Be quiet," he said. "I have some." She opened her purse and pulled out the glucose tablets she always carried. Both Sophia and Richard were diabetic, Sophia type 1 since childhood. Richard type 2, she'd carried emergency glucose for 15 years for both of them. As Julia knelt beside the young woman and saw her face clearly for the first time, her world tilted despite the years, despite the changes. She knew this was Sophia. She slipped the fast-acting tablet between the woman's lips. "Sophia," she whispered. Gregory saw the recognition in Julia's eyes. His face contorted with panic. "What have you done to her?" Julia demanded. "Where's Grace?" Gregory shoved Julia hard. She fell backwards onto the pavement. As he sprinted toward the white van, the sound of multiple police sirens filled the air, growing closer. Julia struggled to her feet and waved frantically at the first police car. The white van stopped him. The police car accelerated past her tires, squealing as it pursued Gregory down the street. Julia returned to Sophia's side. The glucose was working. Color returned to her daughter's face. Sophia's eyes fluttered open, confused and unfocused. "Sophia," Julia said softly, "is that really you?" The young woman blinked several times, then her eyes focused on Julia's dress. A flicker of recognition crossed her face. "Mom." Her voice was weak, uncertain. "Why? Why do you still wear that shabby old thing?" Julia's tears came harder now. Only Sophia had ever called her favorite dress that shabby old thing. "Yes. Sweetheart, it's me. I practiced too much," Sophia murmured. "Didn't have time to eat. Gregory said we had to leave now. We have a performance tomorrow. Regional orchestra thing. ... Another police car pulled up. An officer emerged, followed by Richard Bennett. Her husband's face went white when he saw Julia on the ground. With the young woman, Julia, what happened?" "Richard," Julia sobbed. "I found her." Our daughter Richard stared at the woman in Julia's arms. But she's so different. I almost didn't." He dropped to his knees beside them, pulling both into a desperate embrace. A detective's car arrived. Detective Darnell stepped out as the first patrol car returned. "We have Gregory Hale in custody," the detective announced. Julia quickly handed over Sophia's letters and Grace's report card. "There's an invisible ink pen hidden in the sofa cushions in the waiting room." She told him it reveals hidden messages on the cards. Paramedics arrived and began attending to someone else. Julia stood and saw them lifting Grace onto a gurney. The girl appeared sedated but alive. She was unconscious upstairs. An officer explained, "Looks like he was planning to take her too. You have to contact her father." Julia said urgently, "I'll go with her to the hospital first. We need statements." Detective Darnell said, "The girl's parents will be notified. We'll need all of you at the station." A paramedic approached. "We should examine this young woman too," he said, indicating Sophia. They checked Sophia's vitals and blood sugar. No physical injuries. The paramedic reported just recovering from hypoglycemia. "She's stable now." Detective Darnell opened his patrol car door. "Please, let's go to the station. We'll ensure Grace's parents meet her at the hospital." Julia looked at Grace, and a wave of guilt washed over her for leaving her behind once more. But she knew she had to follow the authorities. She reached out and helped Sophia to her feet. Her daughter alive, found at last at the police station. Officers led Julia, Richard, and Sophia to separate interview rooms. Julia found herself in a small windowless space, with Detective Darnell and another officer start from the beginning. Detective Darnell said his demeanor completely different from their phone call that morning. "How did you end up at Gregory Hale's residence?" Julia recounted everything: finding the letters, visiting the academy meeting. Grace, discovering the hidden message. The detective took careful notes based on our initial investigation. And Gregory's confession. Detective Darnell began. "We've pieced together what happened in 1975 during the spring concert at the Ridgefield Conservatory Gala. Gregory had been giving 12-year-old Sophia secret private lessons. He told you he was preparing her for a prestigious scholarship, correct?" Julia nodded, remembering how proud they'd been that Sophia's teacher saw such potential after the concert while parents were at the wine reception. Gregory told Sophia to retrieve a missing score from the lower rehearsal hall. He met her there. The room had an unused staff door leading to the building's rear and a private parking area. Julia's stomach turned. "We were right there drinking wine, talking to other parents. Gregory administered a sedative," the detective continued. "He claimed it was to calm her performance nerves, something he'd apparently done before. Then he wheeled her out unconscious in a cello case he'd customized over months, specifically for this purpose. A cello case." Julia felt sick. "How did he hide her?" "All these years, the house where you found her was inherited property. On Ridgefield's outskirts, he converted it into his private studio. He kept Sophia there under the name Amelia Dawson, claiming she was his niece who'd suffered psychological trauma and had no family contact. The housekeeper, Ava Moreno, was paid well to care for her. She genuinely believed she was helping an abandoned girl. That's why she didn't hesitate with the glucose. Julia realized she truly cared about Sophia. Gregory homeschooled her detective. Darnell explained, continued her music lessons, obsessively, eventually began taking her to perform at small rural and private venues, heavy makeup. Different hairstyles, always under aliases. He faked IDs, everything under Amelia Dawson. He must have had connections to make the documents. What did he do to her? Julia's voice cracked, and the detective's expression was grim. Gregory's evaluation reveals twisted obsession mixed with delusional fatherhood. He called Sophia, one of his born daughters, a starlight daughter. We believe he abused other children during private lessons. But Sophia was the only one he kept his treasure. He said he forced her to practice, constantly punishing her emotionally and psychologically for any mistakes. Complete isolation, no newspapers, no television, no real human connections, every concert strictly supervised, and for private audience. But why, Julia asked, what was his motive? Gregory lost his wife and 3 daughters in a car accident in 1968. It fractured him psychologically. He believed music could resurrect their memory. His eldest daughter played cello, so he became obsessed with finding gifted chists who resembled his daughters physically or artistically through manipulation, praise promises of success. He gained their trust before taking complete control. No one suspected him. Julia said bitterly, he was a respected figure, award-winning teacher, scholarship mentor, above suspicion. The detective paused. You mentioned Grace's report card might be fake. He kept her at the same level for 6 months, Julia said, to pressure her into private sessions. We're checking with the academy now. Our team is there. Detective Darnell stood. Gregory's been cooperative during interrogation, admitting everything. We'll ensure he never hurts another child. Those other girls who took his sessions, we'll contact them all. I hope his cooperation doesn't earn him a lighter sentence, she replied quietly. Grace said there were many. We'll be pushing for the full charges. Detective Darnell assured her, our field team reported no evidence of other captives at the studio. But it's possible he used those private sessions to scout potential victims. That's just speculation. At this point, there's no solid evidence yet as for whether any of the students were abused during those sessions. We'll know more once we've interviewed the others. After the interview, Julia found Richard and Sophia in the waiting area. Sophia looked small and lost nothing like the confident 12-year-old who'd vanished. Julia sat beside her daughter's sweetheart. Can you tell us, why did you go with him? What did he promise you? Sophia's voice was soft, childlike. I didn't understand then. I was 12, he said. I'd be a famous chist if I did what he asked. He was so nice, always praising me. He said he loved me, that I was special. She looked down. I thought he was my boyfriend. But not like grown-up boyfriends, like someone who liked me best, who wanted to help me succeed. Richard pulled both his wife and daughter close. None of this was your fault. A police officer approached. We can drive you to the hospital if you'd like to check on the other victim. Yes, Julia said immediately. We need to see Grace. The drive was silent at the hospital. They were directed to Grace's room through the window. They saw her father sitting beside her bed, tears streaming down his face. A CPS worker stood nearby, apparently discussing the father's verbal abuse and conflicts with his daughter. Grace's father was speaking. I'm so sorry, Grace. I never listened, never believed you. My ambition for you to be the best blinded me to your struggles. Grace noticed the Bennetts and weakly waved them in. Thank you, Julia said to Grace, taking the girl's hand. Without you, I never would have found my daughter. We were moving across the country tomorrow. If today hadn't happened, we'd have been separated forever. Grace managed a small smile. I'm glad something good came from this. Julia turned to Grace's father. You should be proud of your daughter. She's an excellent chist. Those report cards were fake, designed to push her into private sessions with that monster. But Grace believed in herself. She refused to take the easy path that takes real strength. Grace's father nodded, fresh tears falling. I see that now. I see her now. Richard spoke quietly to Julia. We need to call the moving company, cancel everything, yes? Julia agreed, we're staying. Sophia needs familiar surroundings to heal, we all do. Sophia stood between her parents, still fragile but home. The cello that had been her joy and her prison would need new meaning. Now the music that Gregory had twisted into chains would have to become wings again. Grace reached out, her other hand to Sophia. Maybe we can play together sometime when we're both ready, real music. Not his version. Sophia took the offered hand. Tentatively, I'd like that. Julia watched the two young women, one 16, the other 27 now, though frozen in many ways, at 12-15 years, had been stolen from Sophia, years that should have been filled with high school friendships, first dates, college applications, young adult discoveries. Now at 27, she would have to learn things most people mastered in their teens, you know. Julia said softly, looking at both girls. There's a special kind of strength in refusing to compromise who you are. Grace, you spent 6 months being told you weren't good enough. But you knew better. You knew those other girls weren't more talented. They were just willing to pay a different price. And Sophia? She turned to her daughter, tears flowing freely. You survived. You kept playing. Kept that spark alive, even in the darkness that takes a courage. I can't even imagine Grace's father wiped his eyes. Pushed so hard for success. I forgot that real achievement isn't about reaching the next level or winning competitions. It's about integrity. My daughter had more wisdom at 16 than I had at 45. As they sat in that sterile hospital room, two families broken by one man's obsession began to see the shape of their futures. There would be therapy sessions and legal proceedings, nightmares and setbacks, moments of rage and grief. For all the stolen years, the letters hidden in an old cello had waited 15 years to deliver their truth. They had revealed not a love story, but a predator's careful manipulation, and in exposing that darkness, they had done something Gregory never expected.